Today's guest is a sole promoter, marketing manager, booking agent, record store owner, sports activist. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Voodoo Room, Neil Richards.
Thank you for joining me. And how's things in Coronaville and your end?
Yeah, it's been interesting, mate. Two sources of income are obviously entertainment and sport, and as you would know, my friend, making a living behind the desk, everything has come to a grinding halt. So very interesting times, but just tried to keep myself busy, mate, and doing a few little jobs that never get done. And yeah, mate, just as you do, just try to keep yourself busy and your head in a good space.
Absolutely. I mean, I guess because you used to play NRL, right?
No, I didn't, mate. I wasn't that good. Okay. I'm still involved in the coaching. I coach at different levels. I do some work with the NRL, like as a, I guess they call it like a coach mentor, where I go around to clubs and help coaches upskill themselves, type of thing. So I do that, and then I obviously coach at different levels. Representative football with junior kids, and done some senior footy, mate. So I still do that. Really passionate about it. Do a lot of school workshops with football, rugby league, like your football. But yeah, mate, still very passionate about that, and love giving back to the kids, and it gives you an opportunity to work with young men and women. And while the sport's probably what brings you all together, you get the opportunity to mould some kids and hopefully make a bit of a difference moving forward,
Yeah, I used to work on the NRL as a audio technician.
Oh, interesting.
And
never knew that.
Yeah, and I had no idea because I'm obviously not from New South Wales or Queensland, and so it was the beginning of the Melbourne Storm when they first came onto the scene, and I ended up doing the. It's not rugby league. It's rugby union. The World Cup. The World Cup that they have every 4 years.
Yep, 4 years. So the Wallabies are playing.
The Wallabies. Yep. And I was working on one of those games at Telstra Dome, and I was the guy on the sideline with the microphone. The guy that runs up and down the line. With the microphone.
With the big furry microphone.
Yeah, that was me, mate.
Beautiful.
And I remember it was New Zealand versus Tonga or something like that. And these guys were massive, and I swear you could feel the earth rumble when they would run, right? And it was like a herd of elephants were coming down. And anyway, there was a Steadicam camera guy in front of me, and he was being pulled. Well, he was being shunted by the camera lackey who would hold his cable as he runs up and down the boundary line. So he's about 2 meters away from him, and then I'm either at the front or to the back of him, either side, depending on which way, how fast I can get back. Anyway, the ball I saw, because I played VFL back in the day, I could read the ball play a little bit, and I could see the ball coming towards us, and it went over the line, and the Steadicam guy couldn't get out of the way in time, and these two Tongan guys and a Maori landed on top of him. They shattered his camera. He fell backwards onto the cable holder guy. He twisted his knee, and he was out. He never worked again. Believe it or not, that guy. And there I was, clean as a whistle, because I could read the play and I got out of their way. So
there's a tip there, my friend. If there's a big guy running at you and you can get out the way, you probably do. But yeah, there's some big humans in our sport now. I remember when I was playing senior football quite young. I think I was 16. And I wasn't a big kid. I was 80 kilos, something like that, and playing in the forwards. And a big front rower in those days was 95, maybe 100. So 80 kilos, you weren't ridiculous. And I remember moving down south and sort of playing at another level up, sort of below what is now the NRL, and they were much bigger. But now you look at kids today, and I'm coaching 15-year-olds, 16-year-olds regularly, and I've got kids who are 15 in my thing and 100 kilos of muscle, just big kids. And I feel sorry for little kids who weigh 50 kilos these days, but those kids are generally the toughest ones. So, yeah, some big humans and level, and they're all big and they're all 110 kilos, and there's some big humans. And, of course, you mentioned the Tongan, and Tongans are massive people. So there would definitely be some big hits that day, I'm sure, mate.
Yeah, I just couldn't believe that they could absolutely crush a camera. It was amazing. Right?
There's a lot of horsepower there, my friend. If there's three of them, you might be sitting on about 360 kilos coming at you. So it doesn't surprise me.
It surprised me because, have you ever felt that when they're running up and down the ground, you can feel the earth move?
Yeah, well, obviously when you coach at all different levels, you can feel the impact. Like you can feel they're big humans, and then you hear that impact. You're only, like when you're out there, I played footy and just park footy until I was in my mid-40s. I sort of came back and had a run around with just a local club for some fun, and was definitely old and slow and that. But even at that age, that level, you can sort of feel the hits. But then you get to these kids now who are 16, 18, 20, and that's that big. And some of the hits, we had one a couple of years ago at a representative camp, and these were 14-year-old kids, so 13 going on 14, most of them. And I wouldn't have wanted to get in there. The impact on these young men is pretty phenomenal. So, it's not for the faint-hearted, mate, anymore. It never has been, as you know, Pete. VFL's a different sport, but it definitely has its contact and different types of collisions are different to rugby league and different to rugby union. But, I think they're all pretty physical in their own way, and definitely a young man's sport for sure, isn't it?
Yeah, totally. Because I played VFL up until I was about 15, 16, and I gave it away as soon as I saw the guy next to me who was about 20 stone bigger than me and had thighs as big as a tree trunk, and I'm just looking at him, and he's got hairy legs and hairy armpits, and I'm this skinny, long-headed, fast-running sort of athlete, and I just said, I got to keep out of this guy's way. And I tell you something, he couldn't catch me, but when I was in the pack, he gave me a slap around the ribs, and that was it for me. I said to my mother, I'm not playing anymore, So then I had to make a decision what I was going to do with my life, and I was a bit confused for a long time until I found music again, which it has affected you as a promoter, the lockdown situation.
Yeah, it has, mate, and I think it's going to affect a lot of people moving forward. I mean, I had a few things in the pipeline for this year. As you know, I don't do a huge amount of tours. I'm definitely not one of the big guys. I sort of do those 200 to 600 seater rooms. That's sort of what I do, and I can't compete with the big guys financially. So, I had a few things in the pipeline, mate, but everything's ground to a halt. So, it's very interesting times indeed. But I think the sad thing about it, one thing here in Australia that's sort of quite sad, I think, this whole lockdown, it's how tough it is for people in arts. They sort of the forgotten guys. If you're a farmer or whatever, you're front and centre in everyone's eyes. But when you work in arts, it's very much down the bottom of the list because it's not a real job after all, remember, supposedly. So, yeah.
Do you still have much contact with like Paul Peterson and all those type of guys?
Yeah, mate. Well, not as much in the last few months because obviously, outside of we'll check in on each other and say, how you doing, buddy? Is everyone okay? And obviously, the George Floyd thing happened in Minneapolis where I've spent a lot of time and have a lot of friends, a lot of African-American or black friends over there. So that one was that obviously I was really concerned about. So, I've touched base with pretty much all my clients, a lot of friends over there, just to see how they're doing. So as far as work, I haven't really touched on it, mate, because it's been a moot point. So, I'll check in with Jelly Bean and go, hey, buddy, you doing all right? Or he's been one of the ones to reach out to me, which has been lovely. But, yeah, as far as work stuff, mate, it's really just
something else.
Grounding halt.
Yeah.
So, sounds probably – I don't think I'm alone in that. There's a lot of people doing lots of stuff and throwing ideas out there, but I don't really want to think about doing a tour until I know the lay of the land. It's really, I don't want to spend 2 weeks stuffing around and chasing artists, and nobody knows. So I think it's just time for a bit of self-care, and we all just bunker down until we know what's going on, and then we cross that bridge when we get to it, I guess.
Yeah, totally, mate. So, you were talking about that you were the managing director of that publication.
Yeah, so that's sort of where I got my, professional start. Like, Pete, I was one of those kids that, Pete Passions as a kid, well, probably, I used to play rugby league and I was into music. Couldn't play very well, definitely couldn't sing, not the way I wanted to sing. So I was into music and rugby league and boxing were my other two passions. And so as a kid, I'd every spare cent that I could find, I'd spend on music, and I'd do my sport and that. And when I was probably 15, I got a job in a record shop in Townsville. Back when it was records, of course, back then. And CDs were just coming in. But, so I sort of started working in music retail as a 15-year-old, but I was a bit of a knucklehead, if I'm really honest. I was always in trouble. I was the person you see today is not the kid I was at 15. I was definitely a rat bag. I was always in trouble, and had a bit of a chip on my shoulder. But when I left the military, when I got out, I really wanted to get back into music. And at that point, I knew nobody in music. No, my family knew anyone in music. No, I had zero knowledge of music. Like I knew music, but I didn't know anything about the music business. So I sort of, I think when I left, I sort of did a couple of crappy jobs for a while, fixing boats and selling air conditioning parts and stuff that I had no idea about, but I gave it a crack. And then I stumbled across in Brisbane called Time Off magazine, and I started reading it, and I'm thinking I could do that. So I just emailed them, called them. I can't even remember if it was email world or phone call world, and started writing for them. So fast forward a couple of months, and this new publication started in Brisbane called Club Scene. And at that point in time, it was this little black and white A4 thing. But so I reached out to them and started writing for them. And then after a couple of weeks, those guys really didn't know a lot about music, but they knew they wanted a publication. So they said, would you mind looking after the music stuff? And I'm like, sure. I was working. It was a bit of fun. It was free music. I didn't care. So I started reaching out to all the record companies and stuff like that. And then maybe about 6 months down the track, I think that the guys decided, or the guy, Howard Duggan, who still owns the magazine, decided he could afford to pay me a teeny bit. And, and that's when I sort of became the editor, and then obviously the managing editor. And I was there on and off for 6 months, and they're still going strong today. So that's really where I got my first start. And it was a really cool time because we had Tyrone Noonan, who ended up was our sales rep. Back when he had the big hair, looked like Toadie from Neighbours. Katie Noonan used to write arts for us. Catch from the Resin Dogs used to write hip-hop reviews for us. Mike Goldman, who was on Triple M, would write some reviews for us every now and again. He's obviously now done Big Brother. A good bunch of people just trying to find their way in the industry, and some really good DJs and really good supporters. And we were a dance-based magazine, and that was sort of really where I got my start. So we would get out there and try to make our way against the two big mastheads, which were Time Off and Rave at the time, who were both really good publications. And we had a point of difference being a club-based magazine. You know, we'd put on the Prodigy on our front cover and stuff like that, Vision 4-5 and all these sort of really cool underground back then dance acts. And, yeah, and that's sort of where I got my start. And from there I just sort of hustled and tried to figure it out like I always do, I guess.
So the pub, when you were working in the record store, was that like a commercial record store, or was it independent?
It was independently owned, I believe. I think they were back then, but it was, it was a time of, Dire Straits, Brothers in Arms, and sort of mid to late 80s. So it was that era, it was trying to think. The mainstream records were things like, Whispering Jack and Lionel Richie and Prince and Michael Jack, all the normal stuff. I remember Brothers in Arms being a really big album at that time, selling a ton of them. It was. So in Townsville, there was our one, Nathan Plaza Music. There's a really cool second-hand one called Pet Sounds in town, which was good. There was another one called, I think it was called Wavelength, and interestingly, John Watson, who managed Silverchair and those sort of artists, he actually worked in Wavelength. So he came from Townsville initially, which many people don't know. So John was working there. But yeah, so it was just a normal old record shop, mate, normal stuff. And just, I'd spend half of my pay on the records, basically. Basically anything with a black face back then I'd buy. If it looked funky and soulful, I'd buy it.
I mean, but did you just stumble across that music, or how did you get to sort of be involved with that type of soul and funk music? Because you would have to, you would have had to have sought that out. It's not something that was falling in our laps as the commercial content.
Oh, definitely not back then. My mum and I come from an English family, so in my house, my mum loves country music and soul music. So she would obviously have the old stuff like Patsy Cline and Jim Reeves and Brooke Benton and stuff like that. And my dad would be playing the Eagles and stuff. But the thread from my mum and dad was things like stuff that was big in the Four Tops, Stevie Wonder, a guy called Jimmy Ruffin, Sam Cooke. So I grew up on that, and to this day, I still think Sam Cooke is just the most amazing soul singer. So for me, what it was is I grew up on Motown. I grew up on soul music, so it was just part of my upbringing. And then it was the music I gravitated towards. So they would buy an album, and I still remember some of the albums. They had things like bands like Honeycomb and Chairman of the Board on these albums, and it just blew me away as a little kid. Like I was a kid, so I still liked, the Aussie stuff, that the Cold Chisels and all that sort of stuff, and Kiss and all the stuff kids like. And I still have a soft spot for that. But ultimately, there's always black music that sought me out, and I had it just made me feel good. So I remember working in the record shop, and at the same time, there was a record magazine that used to come from America called Rock and Soul Magazine. And obviously when you talk about black music in the 80s in Australia, you'd probably say Michael Jackson was the big name, followed by Lionel Richie. So I was a big Michael Jackson fan of those first couple of albums. And I remember buying this Rock and Soul magazine, and basically because it had Michael Jackson on the front cover, I think, or Lionel Richie or somebody. And so I remember getting Rock and Soul magazine. I started flicking through this thing, and they'd start talking about Rick James and Parliament Funkadelic and, just stuff like that. So, of course, me working in a record shop, I'd order those things in. They weren't sold in the record stores. No one had Rick James sitting in the racks in Australia. So I'd go and order, and I'd take it home, and I was just blown away by this music. I remember the first time I heard Parliament, I was like, what is this? Nothing like any of my friends were listening to. And, I think it was just something that I grew to love. And so while my friends were listening to, I don't know, the Violent Femmes, I was probably listening to, I don't know, DeBarge or, Jermaine Jackson or, name anything from that era. And I was a big hip-hop kid, so I loved LL Cool J and Grandmaster Flash and Houdini and all these other early hip-hop things too. So, it was just one of those things that I gravitated towards. And as I got older, when I started working in music, it was something that I could explore because no one else was doing it. So I could voice about black music in my dance magazine because it fitted, So, that's sort of where I come from. But it was definitely harks back to my mum and dad's love of, Sam Cooke and Jimmy Ruffin and all these sort of great 60s and 50s soul singers that to this day I still have a very soft spot for,
Yeah, totally. I remember buying the Atlantic Records 45-year box set. Do you remember they had those albums where it went back from 1945 up until about 1983 or something, 84?
I do remember those ones. That was the one that had like a big grey cover, and like the round circle on the front was orange or something, I believe.
Yeah, they all had different colours, but that's where I learnt a lot about soul music and people like Sam Cooke and those type of artists. Up until that point, all I really knew was Otis Redding, Jimmy Smith, more of the blues sort of stuff rather than the soul stuff, which I was on my podcast yesterday because I mixed Nina Farrow and she did a tribute to Anita Baker, and I said, man, that Rapture album is an incredible album, and I don't know how I missed it at the time, but there's one for you. But you've actually toured people like Shelia E and Tony Rich and a whole range of artists. What was your involvement with Shelia E? Were you the tour manager or?
No, I actually did the tour. So it was, obviously I'm really good friends with the Peterson family who, anyone who knows sort of music, they're a really talented family. And what I love about that family is they're the most unaffected bunch of people you could ever meet. It's like, I remember going to their mum's house years ago, Jeannie Allen, before she passed, and it was Mother's Day, and I was over there and I didn't feel very comfortable going to someone's house and crashing Mother's Day, but she insisted I go. And anyway, just sitting in the room, and these guys have got amazing credits. It's like just being in a house full of tradies or a house. It's just what they do, and so unaffected. So I've sort of become good friends with the family over the years. And what happened is Ricky and I were just talking. So Ricky Peterson is the second eldest brother, and amazing keyboard player, producer, did Prince's Most Beautiful Girl in the World, but a bunch of amazing stuff, David Sanborn. And we were just chatting one day and he said, we should do some shows. And I was like, yeah, man, let's do it. Being friends, you can sort of work out a deal that makes sense to everybody. And so we brought the whole family, which is going to be Ricky Willard, who's the eldest brother, who was in the Steve Miller Band for 20-odd years and played on Blood on the Tracks for Dylan, and great guy and amazing guitar bass. So we actually had Vinnie Colaiuta doing the show originally, and it fell over because I think Vinnie either got sick or was dealing with some personal stuff, and he fell over. So then I think we were going to get Dennis Chambers, but then he worked for Santana, so he got a corporate gig, couldn't do that one. So then we had John Blackwell penciled in, and then John had to go on tour with Justin Timberlake, who pay a whole lot more than Neil Richards and Ricky Peterson. And so anyway, we were just chatting, and Paul, Ricky's younger brother, said, what about Sheila? I'm like, she's not going to do that. She's going to be like the drummer in the band. Anyway, we reached out to her and she wanted to come. So it was definitely, it was more of a Ricky show with Paul doing some of his stuff, some of his solo stuff. And of course with Sheila there, you'd be mad not to promote her side of it. So she did 3 or 4 of her songs, and so we did the tour, and it was interesting. It was good. Played some good shows. I think we did Byron. We did a couple of nights at the Basement. We did. Can't remember what we did in Melbourne. Got no idea. Corner Hotel. That's right. We did the Corner Hotel. So that was just a tour one. But it was good fun. Definitely a good bit of fun, and I think we put some smiles on people's faces. And I think I might have lost money on that one, so I wasn't overly happy. But shit happens.
Yeah, it's not pleasant when you lose a bit of coin on something that you think you might make a little bit of something in return, but that's the nature of it.
It is, mate. It is, and that was. But you make it up elsewhere. It's just how it goes. So definitely. I think it was the last one I lost money on, thankfully. But yeah, so look, mate. How I really got into doing touring was really interesting because I was managing some country artists, which is so far removed from my musical knowledge. But anyway, and they had a couple of quite successful and were doing well, and I just got sick and tired of them doing the same shows over and over again to the same people. I loved and appreciated their fans, but just felt like we were on a revolving circle and not growing. So I thought, what can I do to get some of these artists in front of different people? So I my Kana acts from America, get my artists to support them, and I'll play to new. How I got into promoting tours, it was as an artist manager, really, just because I was frustrated at doing the same shit for my artists. You can only play the same songs to the same people so many times. So I went, let's try something different. And then obviously, I did a lot of Americana stuff and brought a lot of stuff over doing in that genre. So yeah, that's sort of how I got into tour promotions. Obviously I'd run nightclubs and stuff like that prior, but as far as tour promotion, that was probably the first. That's sort of to do tours,
Yeah, because you've owned a nightclub in Brisbane, right? You
did.
Yeah,
did.
Was that
so? That was sorry.
Oh, was that just after your working in a retail?
No, so I was in the Navy for just under 7 years. So I did that, and then I came out and did a few shitty jobs. Worked at the magazine, and I'm quite a restless soul, so I loved the time there. But I felt that I couldn't do any more. I felt like I'd done everything that would get done. The business was established. Still got on great with the owner. He's still a dear friend, but I just felt like I needed a change. So. So me and a friend had the idea, let's buy a nightclub. So we did. And once again, so it was probably before its time here in Brisbane. We were the then owned R&B club. There was people doing nights here and there, but we owned it. So we owned the club. Everything was R&B and soul and funk and hip-hop, 90s stuff. We're talking 90s soul and R&B and hip-hop, bit of reggae. So we did that. We opened an urban clothing store off the back of that in a little arcade in the city. And, I did that for about 3 years. Unfortunately, it just probably wasn't really what I liked doing. I had a little daughter, and I didn't want to be getting home at 6 o'clock on Saturday morning and falling asleep while she wanted to play with Dad. So and just some business stuff. And it's a good thing, but I sort of did it for probably 4 years, bought another little one as well in the city as well at one stage there, and had a good time, enjoyed it, but definitely once again probably for someone without kids, put it that way. Your daughter like in, so you definitely sacrifice a little bit, but look, I enjoyed it, mate. It was good, but definitely ahead of its time. If I'd owned it 15 years later, would have made a ton load more money, because R&B was actually mainstream then. Like this day and age, they have R&B Fridays all day on the radio. Back when we were doing it, that shit wasn't on the radio. We had to go and buy our records from Central Station. We had to order them in. It just wasn't mainstream. And we were really fortunate. We had a really, really loyal customer base. Predominantly Polynesians, actually, because they've always loved the music, and really multicultural club. And, but just probably a little bit early for the time, but really enjoyed it. Definitely learnt some business to do and not to do at the time, for sure.
So how's Kris Kristofferson going? Are you still doing much with him at all? I mean, obviously not at the moment.
No, mate. I just that what you can see behind me is just some of the stuff I've worked on over the years. Some of my tours of Everlast and some F Deluxe in there, and what else is there? Tuck and Paddy, Country Music Festival I've done, Hayes Carl. So we just one of the artists I was managing at the time did the Kris Kristofferson tour, and it was a pretty cool thing because Kris was such a lovely, lovely man, obviously a legend, and the artist I was managing at the time, he doesn't really do supports, but I rang him and said, mate, here's an idea. Austin's coming, they've asked you about doing the show with him. And he goes, I don't care about the money, just get me on this tour, I want to do it, So I still remember, and it was James Blundell who I managed for 10 years, and we did this show, I think the first night of the tour at Lee Kernaghan's pub. And there was 1,000 people there or whatever it was. And, I always used to get James to sign after his set, but being a support act, I thought, well, I'll do the right thing here and ask the promoter or Kris if it's cool, Anyway, the promoter wasn't there. I remember saying, Kris, mate, would you mind if James signs in between his set and your set, He's like, why? He goes, well, Neil, why are you asking me? And I said, it's the right thing to do, mate. It's your show. You're the headliner. We just want to make sure we're not stepping. He said to me, oh, no, man, just get that money. And, it was a pretty cool thing. And I still remember the last tour, the last show. I remember thinking, I really got to get a photo. It says Kris Kristofferson. I mean, he wrote Sunday Morning Coming Down, me and Bobby McGee, helped me make it through the night. He's an actor, but he's Kris Kristofferson, So I remember knocking on his door and said, hey, Kris, sorry to bother you, mate. Is there any chance we can get that's the last show of the tour? He looks at me and goes, sure, Neil. He goes, is this shirt okay? And I'm Kris Kristofferson, what am I going to do? Tell Kris Kristofferson to change his shirt because it's not good enough? And I just said to him, mate, no, she's fine, Kris. That'll be fine, buddy. And lovely, lovely man, absolute legend. And, it was really cool to do that tour with him. And I think Andrew McManus may have done the tour, and we were just hired guns. But, really cool experience. Just lovely, lovely man. And it was cool because he gave us his personal details and said to keep in touch and always reach out. So really good dude.
You've worked with Greg Shaw, Keith Urban's manager.
Yeah, well, the funny story. So Greg is who got me into management. So, encouraged me to do management. So obviously everyone knows Keith now has gone on to be a massive star, but a lot of people don't know that Greg Shaw, in the country music industry they do know, but Greg Shaw was a man who fought tooth and nail for that guy and was still with him when Keith had his first US number one, I believe. Anyway, so back when I was the editor of the magazine, we used to share office space at this little place in Newstead called Entertainment, Cap Security, who do a lot of the big concerts, a booking agency called Sure Thing, which Greg obviously started, a publicity firm that did a lot of the frontier tours, an accountant, and us as the magazine, So we shared the space. So one day, I'm sure he's obviously in America trying to get Keith across the line and was doing quite well for Keith. Anyway, our landlord came in and saw me, who was working for Keith. Sure, he's back next week. You've got the biggest office with some space at the end. Would you mind letting Shorey sit in your office for a week? And I'm like, yeah, sure, mate. And I had this big, long office with a couch, and it was pretty long for another desk at the other end of the office, So anyway, Greg Shaw comes in, introduces himself, and plonks himself at the end of my desk next to me. And I'm like, righto. I'm thinking, I wish. So by the end of the first day, I wanted the case and was just in my way and was a pain in the ass, to be honest. And if you know Greg, he's full of beans and he's just the most positive guy ever. And anyway, So I'm thinking, how am I going to last a week with this guy? I'm going to dead set knock him out by the end of the week. Like, it's just bugging me. By the end of the week, I loved him. You know, he's just that sort of bloke. So he was, you know, as sure he does, he's like, mate, you'd be a great manager. And I'm like, once again, excuse my French, I'm not going to manage anyone because I see what you guys do and it's thankless, you know. I'm not going to do it. Don't want to do it. I'm just happy being a journo, you know. I think I was. He kept on at me. And I'm like, whatever. And I think a couple of years went by or something happened. I can't really remember, but it went by anyway, you know, 3 or 4 years down the track. So he rings me, he goes, mate, James Blundell needs a manager. I'm like, so? He goes, mate, you'd be perfect for him. I said, mate, I don't like country music for starters, so it's not the guy, you know. And he goes, mate, you get on really well with this guy. And I'd sort of done some management. I worked with this jazz funk band called Step It Up, who, you know, did some stuff back in Triple J, and you know, like some little friends managing their band mates, you know, like a couple of little bands as you do, just people I like, but not really management. So he sort of pestered me. He said, "You got to meet this guy." And I knew nothing about country music. I knew Slim Dusty. I knew Slim Dusty. I'd heard of James Blundell because he'd had a few big hits, and I knew True Blue. I mean, that was about the extent of my Australian country music, and about as country as I got in my own personal taste with the Eagles and John Mellencamp, you know, and maybe some Bruce Springsteen. I mean, that's about as country as I got. But that was when he was doing albums that were jazzy anyway. So anyway, I went and met James, and he was playing this little hole in the wall on the Gold Coast, and he was not what I expected. So, we just started sort of chatting, and eventually I ended up managing him for almost 10 years and got his career back on track and got him nominated for some ARIAs, got him back on TV and, you know, doing a lot of TV shows, and we did a lot of, lots of stuff together. You know, he got nominated, got put in the CMC Hall of Fame, first inductee into that, and really put him back on track. We don't work together anymore, but we probably stopped maybe 6 or 7 years ago. But the business relationship had run its course. I couldn't do any more, but we're still really good mates. So, you know, one thing I'll say is that all my clients that I no longer represent, I've actually never been sacked, and I still retain a relationship with everyone. So, sure, mate, he was the one who really sort of pestered me to do it, and I mean, yeah, his record speaks for itself. So I figured, all right, let's give this a go, and eventually, end up managing then once you start managing one artist, and record company comes to you and says, "Oh, what about managing this chick?" Or, you know, so I sort of fell into that, as I do with a lot of stuff, and I enjoy it, but some days I hate it. It's a thankless task. Any manager will tell you, you know, like everyone else gets the credit. Hang on, let me back that up. Everyone else probably doesn't see the work that the manager does. And the same as with booking agents, you know, people forget how much work a booking agent does. You know, as a manager, when you've got a great booking agent, you know how much work they do. I don't think the artists ever really know how much work the people behind the scenes for them do. You know, they don't know when your agent might get you that great festival, but he's probably already made 150 phone calls that he got rejected from. So, I enjoy parts of it, but other parts, it's definitely an interesting occupation. You're the promoter. Sometimes when you're a manager, you're the publicist this day and age. You're the big brother, the dad, you know, the bloody therapist. It's a really complex relationship being a manager with an artist, and probably wouldn't recommend it to everybody. Better ways to make a living, but I've definitely been blessed to work with some really good clients. You know, had some good clients and some good people, and definitely been blessed to work with some good humans. Anyway.
Did you bring in Dambi into Australia last year? Yeah, she was awesome, man.
Yeah, look, man, I think I've been really blessed. I mean, over the years, I look around the office here, and I'm back in the '90s, like Montel Jordan, and another level who are sort of like a UK band, and I'm looking around here past to present, there's lots of different stuff, man. So, I've done a lot of black music. I just wish, that when I was really in that scene that it was a little bit more accepted, a little bit more financially viable, I guess. But, as people have gone on and done really well, like, Frontier and now jumped all over R&B through Matt and Joe and all those guys, and do an amazing job. So, probably wasn't the time for it, man. But, I've done a few interesting ones. So I just try to fit. My theory with doing those shows, bud, is would I like to go and watch that artist play? If I would, I'll do the tour. And if it makes sense, you know what I mean? But that's getting tougher, man. It's interesting on that, Pete, that whole thing. Even a couple of years ago, I got offered the tour for, he's just passed away, John Prine. So my buddy Jeff and I had toured Iris Dement, which was sort of tipped into us by a guy called Rob Potts, who's sadly passed away, wonderful human being, who was behind CMC Rocks. Really good guy, been around forever, started off as a covers band booking agents and did a whole bunch of stuff. Really, really wonderful human. And we ended up touring Iris Dement. And through the relationship with Iris, we got offered John Prine. And John was adamant he only wanted to come through us and blah, blah, blah. And I just could never make it work financially, And, so I was like, man, John Prine's a legend. Let's want to see John Prine. And anyway, we just couldn't make the sums work. So we let that one go, and then a couple of years later, someone else did it and made a monster. So, here's what it is. Sold out State Theatre, did really well. So, but, that was sort of, the business for me didn't make sense. I couldn't afford it, but it was a show that I considered because I'd want to go and see it. I think that's always been my thing. Would I like to go and see it? If I would like to go and see it, I could sort of figure out how to promote it. I can't do stuff that I don't know. I couldn't go and do, I don't know, pick a cool, industrial metal band. I'd have no fucking clue how to promote that. No idea. Wouldn't know the name of the mag. I wouldn't know the people in the scene. Had no idea. You know what I mean?
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, totally.
I hate the fact that music has become so disposable and there's no value put on it. When do people cry at a funeral? When they do the montage with music, don't they? Take the music away. Music matters. That's what I think the frustrating thing for me is that people go, oh, who cares about music? It's not a real job. It's not a this. But music's in every part of your life. You're on a building site. What's playing in the background? Music. What's keeping their spirits up? Music. You go to a wedding, it's all based around music. You go to a funeral, it's music. You're in your car, it's music. But the general society places no value on it. I think for me, that's probably the biggest thing is how do we as an industry make music matter again? Because we come from an era, you save your pocket money up and you want that new album. So you'd get the album and you'd walk in and you'd look at the artwork and read it and you'd play it 100 times. But music's now so accessible and so readily available for free that I don't know if today's society has the same values. Doesn't mean they don't love music as much as we do or any other society or any other generation, but do they value it as much?
Well, Neil, I wish you all the best with your health and your career going forward, mate, and keep in contact because it's always been great to work with you, man, and let's hope that things pick up for all of us.
All right, mate.
Good
Thanks,
on you, mate.
buddy.
Too easy. Thanks, bud.
You must have cast a spell.